And but like if you talk to a scientist about that, they say like, well, where's the science in that? Like, you're not getting it. It's like, that's not why people are giving you money. It's not, I mean, it's a little bit of the reason, but the serious scientists are like, people just make things more expensive. Like, why do we have people? Like, okay, well, why do we have people at all? Or anywhere? Sometimes the scientists are the ones who just don't understand. Even though they're like smart people, but like, you know. So you gotta have something that's gonna fire up the, you know, fire people up and get them really excited. And like, I think if we had a serious goal of having a base on the moon and sending people to Mars, and said, okay, we're gonna be outcome oriented. How are we gonna do this? Okay, we gotta change the way contracting is done. You can't do these like cost plus sole source contracts, because then the incentive structure is all messed up. So as soon as you don't have any competition, well, okay, there's no, the sense of urgency goes away. And as soon as you make something a cost plus contract, you're incenting the contractor to maximize the costs of the program because they get a percentage. So they never want that gravy train to end, and they want to make it, they become cost maximizers. And then you have good people engaged in cost maximization because you just gave them an incentive to do that and told them they'll get punished if they don't. Essentially, that's what happens. So it's critically important that we change the contracting structure to be a competitive commercial bid. Make sure that there are always at least two entities that are competing to serve NASA, and that the contracts are milestone-based with concrete milestones. PowerPoint presentations do not count. Like everything works in PowerPoint. Okay, you say, I have a teleportation device. Look, here's my PowerPoint presentation. Milestone-based, competitive commercial contracts with competitors, and then you've got to be prepared to fire one of those competitors if they're not cutting it, and recompete the remainder of that contract. And by the way, NASA's actually already done this. And they did it with the commercial cargo transportation to the space station. And that was a case where NASA, NASA actually, I'm not sure if they thought it would work or not work, but they didn't have the budget to do anything else. So they're like, okay, we're going to try this competitive commercial milestone-based contracting, and it worked great. And they awarded it to two companies, to SpaceX and a company called Kistler. And SpaceX managed to meet the milestones. Kistler did not, so then NASA recompeted the remainder of the contract to Orbital Sciences, but then Orbital Sciences got across the finish line. So now NASA's got two suppliers for taking cargo to the space station, and it's a great situation. Same thing for commercial crew to the space station. NASA competed that. In the commercial career case, it's SpaceX and Boeing. And I think that's also a good situation. So now, like I can tell you, like the SpaceX team is like, we're going to do this before Boeing, that's for sure. And then like I read out the Boeing team, they're like, we're going to do this before SpaceX. That's good. It's a good forcing function to get things done. I can't tell you how important that contracting structure is. That is night and day. There's way too much in government which is where it's a sole source cost plus contract. That just, again, economics 101, whatever you incent, that will happen. And people shouldn't be surprised. It's like, oh, you just, said, okay, if that company manages to find some excuse to double the cost of the contract, they're going to get double the profit because they're getting a percentage. So they can do exactly that. And also, they're not going to say no to requirements. So the government will come up with some set of requirements. 90% of them could make a lot of sense, and 10% of them are cockamamie that double the price of the project. For those 10% of cockamamie requirements in a cost-plus contract, the contractor will always say yes.
There could be a future for you in government contracting at the state level.
Yeah.
Let's go to Governor Hickenlooper and then Governor Ducey.
So I think like most governors, I find it so refreshing to have the unbridled truth, but I do suspect every time you say publicly that the stock price is higher than we have any right to believe, I'm going to guess you probably get some calls from investors suggesting that maybe you don't say that so frequently.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to go back and just briefly, because I think I wrote this down, that you said that artificial intelligence is the fundamental existential risk facing civilization. Did I get that close enough?
In my opinion, it is the biggest risk that we face as a civilization is artificial intelligence.
And so, to a group of leaders, what would you advise that how should we be addressing something that's such a large landscape and yet obviously so important?
I think that one of the roles of government is to ensure the public good, and that dangers to the public are addressed. So that hence the regulatory thing. I think the first order of business would be to try to learn as much as possible. To understand the nature of the issues, to look closely at the progress that is being made, and the remarkable achievements of artificial intelligence. Last year, Go, which is quite a difficult game to beat, that people thought would never be beaten with by a computer, that the computer would either never beat the best human player or that it was 20 years away. And last year, AlphaGo, which was done by DeepMind, which is a kind of a Google subsidiary, absolutely crushed the world's best player. And now it can play the top 50 simultaneously and crush them all. So, just like that pace of progress is remarkable. And you can see more and more coming out. I think the robotics, you can see robots that can learn to walk from nothing, within hours, like way faster than any biological being. But the thing that's most dangerous is, and it's the hardest to kind of kind of get your arms around because it's not a physical thing, is kind of a deep intelligence in the network. He said, well, what harm could a deep intelligence in the network do? So, well, it could start a war by doing fake news and spoofing email accounts and fake press releases, and just by manipulating information. The pen is mightier than the sword. As an example, I want to emphasize, I do not think this actually occurred. This is purely a hypothetical that I'm digging my grave here. But there was that second Malaysian airliner that was shot down on the Ukrainian-Russian border, and that really amplified tensions between Russia and the EU in a massive way. Well, let's say if you had an AI that was where the AI's goal was to maximize the value of a portfolio of stocks. One of the ways to maximize value would be to go long on defense, short on consumer, start a war. And then how could it do that? Well, hack into the Malaysian Airlines aircraft routing server, route it over a war zone, then send an anonymous tip that an enemy aircraft is flying overhead right now.
Let's go to Governor Ducey, and then we'll have, after Governor Ducey, we'll finish our gubernatorial questions, and then 2 questions, and then quick questions, or 1 audience question, and then we'll be done. We're running short on time. Governor Ducey.
Thanks, Elon. I really enjoyed your comments today. And as someone who has spent a lot of time in his administration trying to reduce and eliminate regulations, I was surprised by your suggestion to bring regulations before we know exactly what we're dealing with AI. And I've heard the example used, if I were to come up with a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas that was explosive, people would say, well, you have to ban that, and then we'd have no natural gas. So you've given some of these examples of how AI can be an existential threat, but I still don't understand as policymakers what type of regulations beyond slow down, which typically policymakers don't get in front of entrepreneurs or innovators.
Well, I think the first order of business would be to gain insight. Right now, the government does not even have insight. And I think the right order of business would be to stand up a regulatory agency, initial goal, gain insight into the status of AI activity, make sure the situation is understood. Once it is, then put regulations in place to ensure public safety. That's it. And for sure, the companies doing AI will, most of them, not mine, will squawk and say, hey, this is really going to stifle innovation, blah, blah, blah. It's going to move to China. It won't. It won't, because has Boeing moved to China? Nope. They're building aircraft here. Same on cars. And so the notion that if you establish a regulatory regime, that companies will just simply move to countries with lower regulatory requirements is false on the face of it, because none of them do. Unless it's really overbearing, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about, making sure that there is awareness at the government level. I think once there is awareness, people will be extremely afraid, as they should be.
All right, one audience question. We'll take the first hand that came up. Right here.
Thanks, Elon. Ina Fried with Axios. Early on in this administration, you had argued pretty vociferously that it was best to engage and better to be in the room than not be in the room. Then when the president decided to pull out of Paris, you said that was kind of the last straw and you were going to drop off. Mm-hmm. What drove you to that? And if you were still speaking to him today, what would you say to the president?
Well, I thought it was worth trying hard to do what's worth. It was worth trying. I got a lot of flack from multiple fronts for even trying. When some guy ran at billboards and attacking me and full-page ads in the New York Times and whatnot, just for being on the panel, and in every meeting I was just trying to make the arguments in favor of sustainability and sometimes other issues, like we need to make sure that our immigration laws are not unkind or unreasonable, did my best, and I think in a few cases I did actually make some progress, which gave me some encouragement to continue. But then I just really think that the Paris Accord, man, if I stayed on the councils, then I'd be essentially saying that wasn't important, but it was super important, because I think a country needs to keep its word, it's not even a binding agreement. So we could always slow it down. The argument that there would be job losses, well, we could see if there are job losses before we exit the agreement. And maybe there won't be job losses, maybe there'll be job gains. But yeah, there's just no way I could stay on after that. So, did my best.
All right. All right, well, everybody, if you would please join me in thanking Elon for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.